Who's ready, Bills Mafia? It's the Bills Squad, sponsored by Game Time. Everything Buffalo Bills, every week. Breaking down the big hits and game-changing plays the way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. So gear up and squad up. The Bills Squad show starts now.
Welcome in, Bills Mafia. Jeremy White, Joe Marino, and Jerry Ostrowski here. Bills Squad back at it again. Our twice-weekly conversation, our roundtable, to talk with you all things Buffalo Bills, and lots to get to on today's show. We'll dig into a couple news items. Jordan Poyer says he wants back in. The Bills back at St. John Fisher, and some NFL to-dos as well about playoff seeding. They're going to discuss that. The tush push back on the table. We might leave that aside for now. We've done a lot with that. But the big topic today is Joe's project, the top 10 most important Buffalo Bills going forward. He's collected votes. There's a whole system. It's like Heisman voting. There's an esteemed panel, of which Jerry and I are both on that panel. So good afternoon and welcome in the top 10 most important Bills. Gentlemen, howdy. Welcome back. We're back at it again and ready to dig into one of Joe's pet projects that you put together here, Joe.
Yeah, I'm excited to have a conversation with you guys about it because it's obviously a very big collaborative effort, but I don't get to have these types of conversations. It's a lot of feeding me information, me putting it together, me editing, and now it's kind of fun to get a chance to speak with you guys and get some of your thoughts on the project as well as share some of mine.
Yeah, definitely. It's a fun thing to do. I think my favorite part about it is you can tell each list, and most lists are different, right? But the thing that I think is most fun is you can kind of see off of the list who everybody's kind of flying their flag for. There's a specific pick that, you look at it and you're like, yeah, that makes sense, right? So that's my favorite part of this, just to see everybody's list and just kind of where they all fit in and who's got their flag stuck in the ground for a certain individual. That's always fun for me.
It strikes me like if the players could see the list, it might be like Madden ratings, right? A guy finding out like, oh, I didn't get that many votes. Where am I now? Right. So, Joe, talk to us about the methodology, like how you ultimately started this project, what it's become over the years, and how it's all put together.
So I used to work for a website called FanRag Sports, and as part of our summer content series, I was assigned a bunch of different teams where I would write an article on the 10 most important players to that team. And I always enjoyed doing it. It really kind of forced me to ask myself hard questions and consider, what does this team have and who's important? Like, I'm big on roster construction and team building, and I think identifying those players is just a great exercise in solidifying your thoughts on where a team really is. And so as someone who does daily content on the Buffalo Bills every year since January of 2019, I'm always thinking of different ways to attack conversations on the Bills. And so 5 years ago, I decided that I'd like to do this. And I thought to myself, it's not really that fun if it's just my list. I'd like to incorporate other people, because I would do this whenever I was assigned these projects, and I would reach out to other people. I would say, who would you put in this, and kind of just compare. And when I decided to bring it to Locked On Bills, I said, all right, I want this to be part of a panel. And year one, it was 10 people. And then we've slowly grown to 13 and now 15 people on the panel to submit their top 10s and average it all together and get what is a consensus ranking. And like Jerry said, I enjoy seeing everyone's ballots and allowing this to incorporate a lot of different perspectives. People are going to see players differently, value them differently, value roles differently. I think this gives us a really good opportunity to collaborate and come up with a consensus list. Even some folks have very different opinions on what the future means. I mean, look at John Fina's ballot. He didn't think too far into the future. John's more of a year-to-year guy based on some of his ballot. And so I love that not only do you have different valuations for players and roles, but what does the future actually mean? And I think hopefully through 15 different ballots, we get to a pretty good consensus.
It's funny. I think that when you said that about John, I'm a little bit different. I'm not year to year, but I'm definitely a short segment thinker as far as this goes. And I always go back to the quarterback. I think about how many years does he have left? And I think about that Super Bowl window and just the opportunities that the Bills have. So my list is always short segment. I'm thinking 3 to 4 at the most. And that's kind of where I'm thinking. So some of my choices on my list were based off of that 3 to 4 year segment with this football team.
One other thing, Joe and Jerry, that's interesting to track is how these players are treated as commodity stocks almost, right? Like a guy that might be 2 a year ago and he drops to 8, or someone that was off the radar just kind of rises up the chart. And contract extensions matter as well, because as the Bills buy in on a player, that means that if you're evaluating, you're looking for your rankings. Well, all right, Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott, they seem to think that Greg Rousseau is worthy of that contract, or Christian Benford gets the big deal. So immediately, of course, you're going to respond in kind with moving those guys up your board, because the Bills have identified them as really important players.
100%, Jeremy. Well, and I was going to say, we as a panel, we have rode those waves for 5 years. You know, a guy like Tremaine Edmonds in 2021, he's number 4. Then in 2022, he's number 8. And you could feel the panel saying, you know what, I don't think they're going to bring him back. And if they do, you know, I might be a little bit surprised. And you could feel those things happening and how people stack these. The Bills handed out a bunch of extensions recently over the last year, and pretty much all of those extension players slide towards the top, where there's some big guys that, are still waiting to get that settled out that didn't get but 1 vote. So we do ride those waves for sure as a panel.
As an NFL player, though, you have 2 things. You have your availability and your production. Those are the 2 things you have. And you talked about the stock kind of comparison. That's what gets you up and down the board. But when I look at a guy like Rousseau, and, Rousseau, I believe, is kind of, we know what he is, right? This is what he's going to be. I don't think there's a big, maybe he'll develop a little bit different pass rush repertoire with the new coaches. But honestly, what he is what we're going to get for the next, and we've got him locked up now. So, I just, without giving too many spoilers, I actually had another defensive end on my list that I thought if, without saying his name, if he could be available and still have the same production that he's had, all of a sudden, wow. I mean, look at the future of the Bills if this guy decides to stick around for a few more years. So, yeah, that's kind of how I looked at it.
Jerry, that's interesting that Jerry brings up Greg Rousseau, because that was a big outlier in your ballot. You're the only one of the 15 ballots that didn't include Rousseau, and he lands as our number 2 player overall. And I think that speaks to what I really enjoy about the collaboration here.
But I did have another defensive end on my list that was not Greg Rousseau.
Yes, you did.
Well, let's get to that, Jerry, because I think I can kind of understand what you're saying when you say we know what he is, because, one panelist might look at the top 10 Bills and think, all right, who's got a pop for them for this to make a big difference? And you're establishing Rousseau as a baseline. You're not insulting him by not including him. You're saying, I know what you are and I'm counting on you. So I'm almost not even putting you on the board because you're a bankable asset. Whereas Joey Bosa, somebody like that, if they're gonna take that next step, it's because a guy like Bosa is really important.
Right. Just like Khalil Shakir, okay? He's on my list. Maybe not as high as some other guys had him. He's another bankable asset. We know what Khalil is. He got more credibility anyway from me because of just how important his relationship with Josh Allen is. And we know that. And Josh thrives with him in third down. But honestly, if you look at, like, for instance, if you look at Jackson from Arkansas, in 2 years, his production could be as good or maybe better than Greg Rousseau. So maybe we're putting Jackson on that list. I mean, I just think that when you look at the depth now at that position, things we have, if Greg's not playing, yes, it will hurt this team. But I think that now all of a sudden there's some other pieces that can take places where, like with Shakir, when he's out of the game, we feel him being out of the game. And that's kind of where I went with that.
So Josh Allen is ultimately number 1. Spoiler alert, everybody. That's one of the easiest conversations you could have, right? That Josh Allen's number 1. And then Rousseau comes in at number 2. So, looking at overall the big picture, the gap from 1 to 2 is obviously massive. There's a big number 1 spot. And then the battle for number 2, this is where a tier comes in, right? We're talking Rousseau, Dawkins, Benford. Like, there's a good conversation to be had for the second most important player on this team and who that is, because number 1, I mean, should we spend some time on Allen? I mean, he's arguably the most important player in the league, never mind just to the Bills.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to put it. Not only the most important player to the Bills, but the most important player in the league to their team. The Bills without Josh Allen, you wonder if they're a playoff team. The Bills with Josh Allen, you wonder if they can win the Super Bowl.
Right. Exactly. There is nobody on that roster that can fill his shoes. There's nobody on the Bills roster, but it's just like myself and Joe Miller and John Fina. We have our own group called Overreaction Buffalo, and we do a post-game show, and we talked about it on our video. We give out the Dude Awards, and when we give out the Dude Award, the statue of the Dude Award is Josh Allen. We don't pick Josh Allen because he is that dude, right? And I think everybody knows that. And it's one of those things where just like the Bills, people clamor all the time. You need to get a backup. You need to spend all this money on a backup quarterback. It doesn't matter, guys. It doesn't matter. I don't know if there is a backup out there that can do the things he does, develop whatever. So, the way they handle the backup quarterback situation, I have no problem just because of that. But no, I mean, he's that guy. I mean, he's that important to this franchise.
And the way they handle the backup for their number one is to get someone he's comfortable with, right? Like that seems to be the main goal. The joke might be they bring in his friends, but when you've got a guy this important, I do think that makes sense. If he goes down, there are very few guys that could go in and be somebody of consequence or of significance. So it's just, okay, who helps him stay in the right state, right? Almost like a caddy to a golfer. Hey, who's going to make sure your mind is right, Josh? Who's going to make sure that you are level or whatever you're doing, whether it's watching film, the way you play, in your ear between series? That, to me, seems to be the role of backup quarterback for the Bills.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Jeremy. The Bills, the most important component of what the backup quarterback for the Bills brings is not their capacity to run the offense if Josh Allen gets hurt. It's how they support Josh Allen every single day as a teammate during practice, during games, during camp. That relationship is what matters most. I think that entire room, the QB coach, the depth at quarterback, is all working to optimize Josh Allen's performance. And it's not that he needs a mentor or someone to hold his hands. It's not that at all. It's being an asset to him as a peer and helping him play his best football. That's what it comes down to. And that's the approach the Bills have had. And I think that's somewhat helpful because now you're not talking about a $5 to $7 million a year backup quarterback. You can get by with a Trubisky or a Mike White who are going to be less than $2 million cap hits. And so for an expensive roster, it also helps you not have to invest a lot. Other teams need to put money there. The Dolphins need to have resources in their depth at quarterback. The Bills aren't a team that fits under that criteria.
I want to rewind a second because I want to ask Joe, I want to talk to you specifically and Jeremy about this. And I beat the table for Greg Rousseau for quite some time and kind of what he was or what he is, as a player, a great combo defensive end. But when we put this list together and I started looking at the defensive side of things, I started looking at factors of my rankings and where they were on the list. And I compared them to, if we go into a game and this player is not available or that player is not available, what is a bigger loss for us? Like, for instance, prime example, Terrell Bernard for me is a must-have on the field. And when he's not healthy or not playing, I think that's a huge disadvantage for the Bills. Kind of, I don't know where you had Rousseau ranked, either of you guys, but what was your theory or what was your thinking in ranking him as high as you did? Why is he more important than Christian Benford or Terrell Bernard or, the likes?
I had him at number 3. And the reason I had Rousseau at number 3 is I think structurally the way the Bills play defense with light boxes, I think his run defense is critical if that's going to work, right? They give 6-man boxes as high as a rate as any team in the league. You need Greg Rousseau to really play gap and a half. Number 2 is he just turned 25 years old. It's crazy, right? He's like the new Tremaine Edmonds. He's still young. He's 25 years old and, only really 1 year of playing the defensive end position in college. It was like a receiver and safety coming out of high school. And I think there is some more ceiling to unlock with him. I think he's still learning how to apply his physical gifts to optimize production on the field. And maybe that's not what we like to hear going into a guy's 5th year, but I think we've seen the Bills unlock guys more and more as they continue to develop. And I think there is more ceiling as, I think he's a guy that wins a particular type of way and with power and compression. I wonder if the improvements around him will unlock more from Greg Rousseau. I don't think he's a sack artist, right? I don't think he's that type of guy, but if this defensive line depth truly is what we think it can be this year, I think Rousseau is definitely a candidate to have more splash production. And I mean, and the pressure numbers are really, really good. They're as good as any rusher in the league. It's just turning pressures into sacks. And I think there's ways that he can get better at that, which would vault the numbers. Obviously, they made a huge commitment to him salary-wise. And so a team's counting on this guy to be an answer. And we do love the idea of Bosa, but Bosa's a one-year thing. And we don't know about Landon Jackson. And Epenesa's probably his last year. Like, Rousseau's got to be that dude. And I think him becoming that dude was really important to me. And that's why he landed at 3.
Yeah, I had him at 3 also. And just because I feel like I probably don't appreciate him enough. What I wanted to do after Allen was go for the trenches. I had Dawkins 2 and Rousseau at 3, and then started to go out from there. But for me, like, Rousseau is as advertised pretty much since showing up. He made big plays in his rookie season. He's made plays every year. And you know, it's funny, Jerry, like, I think you're so right when you say we know what he is. Maybe there is another level. I think part of what is key here is he doesn't even really have to hit that to still be valuable and important to the Bills. So I had him number 3. You know, I thought about other players on the defensive line. I like the idea of Bosa. If this were a shorter term thing, I might say him. But for me, Rousseau was an easy number 3 just because he's pretty much been as advertised from a scouting standpoint from day one. The length, you've seen him make plays, batting balls down, intercepting Patrick Mahomes in his rookie season. Like, to me, he feels like he is Bills DNA and like right to the core of this franchise. And it was not surprising to me also that they extended him before that 5th-year option even hit. Like, let's get this thing done. They're out in front of that. So for me, it was a good example of one of those ones where the Bills identify him. So I thought, all right, I'm gonna put him up there high on the board.
Right, and I'm sure it wouldn't surprise you that I had Terrell Bernard number 2 and Christian Benford number 3. So those, and you know, kind of that thinking.
We'll get a break in. When we get back, we got to talk about maybe not statistically the biggest faller from last year, but last year's top 4, number 2 and number 4, and where they came in this year, to me, is a story, Joe. It's a big story. I'll tell you who those players are and just how far the fall is on how important they are to the Buffalo Bills. That's coming up here on Bills Squad in a moment. Hey, so say goodbye to sticky notes, scribbled plans on the fridge, and overlapping calendar invites. The Skylight Calendar is here to bring clarity to the chaos and help families stay organized without the stress. Sleek digital display syncs with your existing calendars, Google, Apple, Outlook, and more, making it simple to track appointments, practices, dinners, and reminders all in one easy-to-see place. We have one of these, and it is key. You can like very easily sync your calendars, and I can throw something in my calendar, my wife throw something in hers, and it goes to the Skylight, which is right on our counter. So syncing calendars, huge. I know about practices coming up or an appointment somewhere. It is really useful. See your whole week on a clear 15-inch HD screen, and it helps you stay focused and less overwhelmed. And you don't have to ask, hey, what's going on tomorrow? Because you can look and you can know. So Skylight. Right now, Skylight's offering our listeners $30 off their 15-inch calendars by going to skylightcal.com/NFL. Go to skylightcal.com/NFL for $30 off your 15-inch calendar. That's skylightcal.com/NFL. Back here on Bill's Squad, and looking from last year to this year, I think one of the stories in looking at this year's top 10 most important Bills is to look at 2024 and see a couple names that have drifted a bit, Joe. And, Jerry, I'll be interested to hear what you had about these guys on your votes as well. Last year's number 2 is this year's number 8, Dalton Kincaid. Kincaid went from 8 as a rookie to 2. People expected the breakout, and then back this year, we're back to number 8. So that breakout might come, and he could shoot back up, but it speaks to maybe the everybody eats model, or it speaks to maybe people kind of cooling on Kincaid's role as some sort of, crown jewel, some sort of megastar in this offense. It's a pretty big drop from 2 to 8 for Kincaid.
I feel like Dalton Kincaid's been the biggest thing I've talked about for the last 4 months on this podcast, and people have really soured on Kincaid. And I think there's a number of factors, all those vacated targets, right, from Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, and you figured a lot of that was going to go to Kincaid as a first-round pick that they traded up to get, and it didn't quite meet those numbers. I know a lot of people were counting on that from a fantasy perspective, and then let's be honest, Josh Allen makes one of the all-time throws in the history of the NFL, and Dalton Kincaid dropped it, and it ended the drive that gave the Bills a chance to go to the Super Bowl. That's not going to make people real happy about the guy. So I think there's a lot of context missing when you just look at those factors, but people are down on Kincaid. I was still happy to see him land in the top 10. I figured he'd fall quite a bit, but yeah, you can feel it, right? I think these rankings really do put some tangible feel to kind of some souring on Dalton Kincaid, but at the same time, a level of optimism. He's still number 8.
I had him at number 5, so I had him above the group ranking. I think that Dalton Kincaid is a huge part of the future of this football team. I was not shocked that he had a sophomore slump. I mean, it's something that happens across the league. You add the injuries that he had, not shocking to me that he had issues. Then you go ahead and you look at what Joe puts up about the Josh Allen numbers and the accuracy, or lack of accuracy throws to Kincaid, where he had separation and he was open. And you start to put this picture together to where maybe his year last year wasn't the fact that he's not capable. You just had 3 areas that all come together, and then that, calls for a subpar season for him. I truly believe for the Bills to get over the hump and be that team that wins the world championship, they have got to figure out a way, Joe Brady, Josh Allen, the likes, to make sure Dalton Kincaid is incorporated in this offense, because he has all the skill sets to beat today's defenses. I mean, he does all the things that Kelsey can do. He does all the things the great route running tight ends can do. We just have to get the production out of it. So the throw's got to be there. The availability's got to be there. And when all those things come together, I think you're going to have the player that they moved up to pick in the first round. So I think he's still very, very vital to this offense. And honestly, again, another guy where I look at my list and I'm putting it into a 3 to 4 year window. Where's Dawson Knox's eventual departure going to fall from this football team? You've got a 6th round pick that comes in, Jackson Haas from Georgia Tech. Again, that room could get lacking pretty quick. So he's got to step his game up to continue to help get this offense to even levels, above where they were last year, which were record-breaking numbers.
We all had him about the same spot, like looking at all of our rankings and where he ultimately lands, 6th to 8th in that neighborhood. I kept him in the top 10 because, for the Bills and their conversations about how they invest in their pass catchers, I got asked a lot this weekend about the conversation with Brandon Beane. It's now the new thing that everyone brings up to me when they see me for the first time if I'm out anywhere. And I think about the level of investment and the level of belief they would have had in Kincaid when they drafted him. They're not going to be scared off by a year where there's injury and it didn't just come together. We've talked about how Kincaid went from one of the most efficient pass catchers in the entire league to last year where there's this big drop off. So they'll probably find it because there's talent there. There's a lot of ability there. And, if he ups his play strength in the way that they want, whether that's from a durability standpoint, I still think that Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott, they kind of have eyes, maybe not McDermott as much, but eyes on Kincaid becoming some household name in the NFL. I mean, that's hard to do at the tight end position. There's a lot of guys at the top, and I don't know that he has to be Gronk or he has to be Kelsey, but can I get Trey McBride production out of him? Trey McBride's a really nice tight end that puts up a lot of numbers, in part because he gets a lot of targets. And maybe over time, that'll start to happen. I feel like the everybody eats thing is a great thing for Allen, but eventually he's going to settle into his spots that he likes and guys that he trusts. And whether that's Kincaid or Shakir or Coleman, someone will emerge each and every year or each and every game. And I would just put Kincaid firmly in the top 10 in terms of how important he is, because I think that they'll get that connection back that they had 2 years ago.
Well, the other thing is this. You've got a third-year player that had tremendous amounts of record-setting rookie production his first year in the league that now is on a rookie contract for potentially this year and 2 more. So you've got a high output guy at a lesser number. You've got to really consider that cap mark as well. And, Kincaid gives them the ability to sign other guys because you're still playing on that rookie deal.
I want to give a little bit of love to the offensive line, because you got both tackles landing, Joe, on the top 10 most important Bills. Both tackles land in the top 5, and that is a meteoric rise for Spencer Brown, and deservedly so, right? Like, Brown goes from, is he outside the top 10 2 years ago, and right back up to number 5 overall, deserved because he's become a heck of a player for them.
Well, I think you consider if the Bills would have went to the Super Bowl and played against the Eagles, the reason that people think that the Bills would have given the Eagles a better chance game than Kansas City is because they can pass protect a whole lot better than Kansas City, right? It's because of Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins, and they have such unique roles in this offense. I know Jerry can probably validate what I'm saying here. Have you ever seen tackles like this in the NFL? Guys that run and pull and do longer pulls to this level. They don't get any help either. There's no help. They don't get tight end chips or running backs that stay in. These guys are on an island against whoever. It doesn't matter. Does not matter who they're playing up against. They are 1v1. And Josh Allen was the least stacked quarterback in the NFL 2 years in a row. And this run game is what it is. I mean, obviously, Josh Allen's a huge part of the run scheme and James Cook as well, but it's how they use these tackles on these tackle wrap plays and really getting them out in space. Even if they're backside, they become play side real quick on these pulls. I've never seen a team use their tackles quite like the Bills do. These guys do it at a high level, and it's as big of a deal as for why this Bills offense is what it is as anything not named Josh Allen. It's a special pair, and they use them in a very, very unique way.
I've never seen anything like it. When I was playing in Buffalo, we would go into the game plan that week, and the first thing we would do is identify if they had just Myles Garrett, Chris Jones, who you name the likes. Okay, I didn't play against those guys, but players like them. All right, and we would find them, and the entire pass protection package would be geared to going to those guys to block them, because if we can't block them, we can't get plays off. This group, they don't care. If you watch them when they play the Chiefs, if you watch them when they play the Browns, you're one-on-one. And if you get beat, Josh, figure it out, right?
Yeah.
It's the damnedest thing. I've never seen anything like it. John and I talk about it all the time. There is no help at all. I mean, there's no chipping, you might get a tight end stays in once in a blue moon, but no, I mean, that's how much pressure is put upon these guys, not just in pass pro, but like Joe talked about, the fold schemes, the trap schemes. These two let Aaron Cromer and that run offense of the Bills do some really, really imaginative stuff. They're incredibly vital to what they do up front. And what's kind of cool to me too, and I'm not saying Deion's not a powerful run blocker, he is, but Deion's so athletic and so light of foot. You put him and Edwards together, and you almost have that kind of stretch type side, and then you've got Osiris Torrance and Spencer Brown, those two are just hammers, and you've got a power side. So that's why it kind of freaks me out that when he runs the sneak, he always goes to the left side. I'd be jumping behind Torrance and Brown.
Well, one other thing to call out on the on them not getting help in pass protection. When you do 5-man protections, guess what that means? All 5 of your eligibles are going out for passes, right? You maximize the menu for Josh Allen, which, I mean, maybe that seems like a simple truth that's baked into that, but a lot of teams can't do that. They're only having 3 or 4 guys in routes. The Bills are sending 5 every time because they can, because their tackles are Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins.
Little love for Dawkins here is, I've got a picture up for you here on our YouTube feed, and, out in space, Jerry, one thing I'd like to ask you about this, I love to watch the videos of Dawkins working with his hands. And, I'm not someone that's known too much about how offensive line ever gets played, but I'm always seeing clips of Dawkins doing the chops and just dropping guys and using the momentum against them. And he's just like, it's incredible to watch that level of technique from a position that's thought of as not a skill position. He's constantly blowing me away with how good he is at those.
The thing that's amazing about Deion, and you talk about that, the high-level hand fighting he does at tackle, the chops and then the snatch and grabs, the pull guys on the ground, and he'll get called for holds that aren't holds. It's just him dominating a defensive end so badly with that technique that the umpire feels the need to throw a flag. But my favorite thing about Deion is Deion does Deion. And he does it really, really well. And I've said this before. If I'm going to go to a clinic, if I'm going to go to the Glazer clinic and walk up there and I'm going to teach 350 offensive line coaches in that room, I will use Deion's stuff, like his hand stuff, pass setting stuff. I'm going to Spencer Brown. I'm going to put Spencer Brown up every time, because Spencer Brown is a drive catch dude. It is like textbook. And that's the one thing from his first year to now. You can see his pass pro clean up so well. Deion does Deion, and Deion does not care. And it's awesome to see. I mean, he might be one of my favorite players of all time in the NFL, Dawkins, because of just his attitude, the way he plays. He has fun. Believe me, I get giddy talking about him. I think he's great. But like I said, if you're sitting down with your young offensive lineman at the house and you want to learn how to drive, catch, or pass pro, you're not watching Deion. You're watching Spencer.
Well, nobody can do it like Deion. I mean, this guy's lining up ahead of the guard. He don't care if it's Chop Robinson who runs a 4.4. He wants to get those hands on so fast, and he has so much trust in his lower half to be able to frame. It's literally unprecedented.
But his secret is his width. His width and his alignment. If you watch Deion, he'll cheat his splits in pass pro depending on who he's playing. And we were always taught, and it's still to this day, an offensive tackle has to get to a spot before the defensive lineman does, so that you can then dictate to them what you want them to do instead of vice versa. And by width of defensive end, that spot gets a little wider. And if you watch Deion, he's a vertical set guy. And he cheats his splits and he gets to those spots. And like I said, man, sometimes it's feet together or whatever. I don't care how he does it. He gets there 99.9% of the time before the other guy does. And if he does get beat, he just, athleticism takes over and he just wins the rep.
This conversation on these two is incredible. I got two questions to come up with. All this kind of sounds like another Buffalo great athlete of all time. You're saying he's one of one. He's so unique. Like, you would never teach your kids to play goal like Dominic Hasek, right? But he did it his way. And he's amazing. You can't do that. Basically, is that kind of what you're saying here?
That's exactly what I'm saying. I mean, I used to laugh. I'd go down to this locker room after Sabres games. A lot of us guys from the 90s were big, Sabres fans. Used to go to Aud all the time. And I remember one time walking in, and Dom is standing at the door. He's like, "Big O, you want to come hit the weights?" And he's got his shirt off. He's got no shirt on, and his bottoms are still on, and he's going to go work out. And I mean, he looked like a 14-year-old kid. I mean, there's just nothing. He's a slinky. But the thing about this is, if you look at Dominic, and it's great you brought up Dominic Hasek with Dawkins. Still, though, it's the one thing I preach all the time: situational awareness. Right? They play the percentages. What did Dominic Hasek do so well? He took half to 2/3 of the net away by flopping on the ground and said, if you're going to beat me, it's going to have to be high, right? And Deion does those same things. It's unorthodox, but he still plays the percentages. He understands situational awareness. And, I mean, he wins at a high rate. Like I said, man, he's awesome to watch.
How much of what you're laying out here about Spencer Brown and Dawkins and the differences in them, and two of the most important Bills making the top 5, how much of that is a credit to Aaron Kromer and the job that he does with individual linemen? And does he let those players be them, or the versions of themselves, or at least is open to them being great at what they're great at?
I didn't want to speak again. I was going to let Joe talk, but no, I agree.
I'm letting you go, brother.
I agree 100%. That's what makes Kromer great. He does not force feed a system. He takes what he knows and takes the players he has and feeds them what they do well and allows them to go out. It's a magical thing. They all do what they do well, but they're able to play as a group together as 5 guys. And no, Kromer's been the biggest addition to that football team as much as anybody.
I had the privilege a few summers ago to attend O-line masterminds, and it's like 300-something NFL offensive linemen, and they're getting together, talking technique, talking about, just different strategies, how to be a pro, how to block. They watch film. I couldn't believe I got to be there. I've never wrote so many notes down in my entire life. And there was 2 presentations that really stand out to me, and they went back to back. And one was from Taron Armstead, one was from Lane Johnson. And they're talking about their pass pro techniques. And Taron Armstead gets up there and says, you know what? If I can block somebody in pass pro and not touch him, that's my goal. I don't want to put my hands on him. I just want to win with my feet and mirror. And if I don't touch him, then that's a win for me. Lane Johnson gets up and he says, you know what I want to do in pass pro? I want to get my hands on immediately. And it was in that moment I realized, you know what? There's a lot of different ways to do this. These are 2 amazing players, some of the best of the last 15 years in the NFL. But they have 2 completely different approaches. And it reminds me of Aaron Kromer and when he talks about, you know what? I'm not going to make them execute and function in the way that I think it should go. Everyone has different body types and sizes and skills and techniques. I want to tailor what they do to maximize what their skill set is. And Jerry, you could probably speak to this. I'm not sure that's normal. I think there's probably a lot of O-line coaches that say it's supposed to be done this way. It has to look this way, when maybe that's not what's best for the player and what their body type and skill set actually presents.
It's not normal at all. It's absolutely the not the norm as far as this goes, because the O-line coaches are very set in their ways. They have a certain way of doing things, and they teach it that way. Their drills are based to the way they teach. Everything they do is based to the way they teach and want things done. So for Cromer to be able to get these guys to do what he wants done, but allow them to have the freedom amongst individuals to be able to do what they want to do as far as how they, their pluses and minuses and their attributes, it's kind of unheard of, actually. I mean, I can only think of a few instances in the league where guys did things that were different and were successful. I know I keep going back, but it's because I'm old. I'll be 55 in July, but I always use Randall McDaniel as an example. And if you want to go watch something crazy, go to YouTube after we're done, Google Randall McDaniel and watch his stance. And you're like, how did he play? Well, he used it because he was so athletic. It was a timing mechanism for him. So he would actually get to the hole on counter and power when he was supposed to and not be there too quick. There's just a lot of things like that. But no, it's pretty cool to watch in Buffalo, man. Especially when you watch those all 22s and you break each player down and you're seeing what they're doing. It's a lot of it is different, man. They're all different.
Rolling through the top 10 most important Bills. Lots of good line talk right there. When we get back, two things to bring up. One, the rookie that made the top 10. And two, the big star player that did not and got one vote overall. It's coming up next on Bill Squad. Bill Squad rolls on here. Jeremy White, Joe Marino, Jerry Ostrowski. Like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. We're doing this twice a week, obviously. Once we get into the season, of course, we'll have plenty from St. John Fisher and training camp. The Bills have just announced that they're going back to Fisher for another year, which is very exciting. And then during the season, it might be a little bit of a downtime. We're still rocking here, but make sure you like and subscribe and follow on the Locked On Bills channel as well, because we're rocking all throughout the season. We're doing Joe's top 10 most important Bills players, a panel he put together, and the results. We've talked about Josh Allen, Dawkins, Greg Rousseau, Spencer Brown, all inside the top 10. And next, let's get to the rookie that made the list. Max Hairston makes the list as a first-timer, 9th overall, new to the team, and ranked 9th as the most important player to this Bills team. So let's talk about it, how important he really could be and how much of a difference he could make in season 1.
He made my ballot at number 10. And with Hairston, the reason I decided to put him in there, even though he's never played a snap in the NFL, is because I think he's a critical piece in the direction of this defense and being able to play with tighter coverage shells and being able to match personnel a little bit more with some speed down the field and the playmaking ability that he has as a guy that really hunts the football. And I think if he can make good on the prospect that he is, that's going to mean a lot for this defense. And you're talking about, I mean, if he reaches his ceiling with Benford, that'll be the best corner tandem this team's had in a long, long time. Certainly the best under Sean McDermott. And so it's that ceiling that got me excited and had me include him at number 10, which is obviously the last spot. So there was a lot of thought put into that.
I had him at number 7. And again, I go back to my theory of small windows, right? 3 to 4 years. And we've got Benford tied up for another, 4 to 5. You bring in Hairston, who comes in and now brings a completely different skill set. We've got the solid veteran, the guy who plays with a ton of techniques and smarts, good athlete, not crazy speed. We bring in kind of the guy that's a high-end athlete that has great speed, that makes that secondary super athletic, can play zone, can play man like Joe talked about, giving help over the top. But the thing that I like about the Hairston signing is it gives the defense big playability. Okay, so what I say by that is we led the league in takeaways last year. How many of those takeaways were like big-time dynamic, change the field, bringing running back a fumble or an interception for a touchdown, just, really dynamic take? We took the ball away. That's a big play, right? but just the energy of it, and just that energy and what I think Harrison's going to bring to that side of the ball. I want to see more of that out of that defense. I want to see T.J. Sanders when he gets to the backfield, makes a sack. I want to see him excited. I want to see guys jumping around. For so long, it's been a very workman-like, business-like defense. I want to see that kind of fire come back out of him. I think Harrison, besides the fact his ceiling is huge and can make, help this defense where we have a weakness, the ability to make big plays again, I mean, I get a pick down the sideline and give me the Deion high step into the end zone. I'm all about it.
So much like this list features 2 tackles, the top 10 most important Bills features 2 corners in Hairston and Benford. And Joe, I'll ask you, you had Benford down a little bit considering where he lands on the list. I think, Jerry, you and I had him 3 and 4. He ends up in the top 4. And Joe, you had him down to number 7, which of course is not an insult, but what was the reasoning for 6 other players ahead of Christian Benford?
Well, let me start by saying Christian Benford's probably my favorite player on the team. That's not Josh Allen. So when you started going down that narrative to ask me the question, I'm like, oh, really? I had him that low. I think it's a lot of what you did, Jeremy, and I valued the trench play. That was what. So if you look at the players I had ahead of him, I'm pretty sure they're all trench-related players, and that was something that I wanted to be felt in my rankings. And I guess I hate to say it like this. Christian Benford unfortunately missed like most of that Chiefs game, and the Bills still had a really good chance to win it. Would they have had a better chance if they had Benford? For sure. But I don't know. He's still number 7. I don't want to be like I'm down on Benford. I love Benford. But I went for the trench players, and I started to think a little bit about what I hope happens with this corner tandem and if it doesn't happen, kind of leaning into the same tendencies of how they played the position and how that's not necessarily maximizing the profile. So there's a little bit of that bleeding into where I'm at with it too. Just a lot of it is me projecting roles as opposed to, all right, maybe there's times where they just want these guys to play zone, stay leverage. Well, that's going to take away from the value of what a Benford can really bring.
Is there a next step for Benford, or is the finished product pretty close to that?
Well, I've said repeatedly, I think he's been a top 5 corner in the NFL over the last 2 years, very, very comfortably. I think with Benford, man, the only thing that he's really missing is he's not an elite athlete, right? He's not a bad athlete, but he's probably a slightly above average athlete. And so I think there's going to be some matchups where he's going to go against a really shifty receiver, and it's going to be tough for him to not allow some quick separation. And so I think just leveraging those route stems a little bit earlier against some of those shiftier players is probably about it. But the guy's so technical. He's so good down the field. He's such a good tackler. He's got really good ball skills. And I think his interception numbers are pretty good. They should be. But he really does feel the ball very well. I think it's probably just, can he become even better in press coverage to leverage routes against shifty receivers? Because I think he's really, really a complete player.
Do you think this gives the Bills some availability as far as if we get Hairston up to speed and he shows that man coverage ability that we all think he has? Can we do some things where we start, bracketing? Maybe we bracket Benford's side and let Hairston go man to man and duke it out. I mean,
they did that with Trey White. Yeah. When Trey White was at his best, they did that. And so that's your math changing component when you can do that. When you could say, okay, we're going to play. I mean, you could space the field so differently where you're one-on-one. Now we have 6 other players in coverage to space the rest of the field as opposed to doing it with 7, but the whole field when you're taking a third of it away. That's math changing stuff.
Right. And that's kind of what I thought about and why, Harrison's on my list. I think you have some abilities with him if he does develop into what we think he can be to do that.
Yeah. To look at like everybody's rankings, it's tough. You have a guy 7th, you think he might be the second best player. And, we've all got these things that we're working through here. So, the Bills have a number of good players. To the big name who did not make the top 10, and maybe more stunningly, Joe, got only one mention, and that's James Cook, who did not sign a contract extension. Now, I would say if he were extended, I bet his name pops up in here. But right now there's this uncertainty in terms of, the most important Bills for the future. I think he's darn important for this year, but for the future, I'm as uncertain about it as Brandon Beane and James Cook might be. I don't know what the future holds for this pair.
I'd have to think that if you go along with the, man, I can't believe I'm saying this again, the everybody eats mentality, is a running back in your backfield to pay him that type of money that important when you're going to feed everybody? I mean, I'm with you. I want James Cook back on this football team as well. And I think that Joe put out a really good episode last week talking about the Derrick Henry situation and just how that maybe puts a big damper on this Cook request for the money he wants. But seriously, yeah, we all want him there, but I don't know. I'm not willing to leverage the future of my football team for it. And I think it's pretty safe to say, and I'm gonna go ahead and jump on. I sound redundant, and I like Joe a lot, so I'll just go ahead and repeat something else he says all the time. We're not losing games in the playoffs because we're not running the ball. Our offense isn't very good, right? It's because of our defense. We need to make sure our defense is paid. So if you're going to pay people, if Bosa stays healthy, has an unbelievable year, let's use that money to keep Joey Bosa around. We'll find another running back.
Got a little spicy on that Cook segment on the Friday episode. Between that and the Kincaid, I was in my feelings a little bit. That'll happen from time to time. Jeremy, I'd love to know the answer to that question. If James Cook got an extension, how different does this look? Because I just don't know. I don't know. The fact that he got one vote, and it was from Anthony Marino, who's a running back truther.
Yes, right. That's right.
And put him at number 10. That says a lot. I mean, for me, I just don't know that I get that nervous about the Bills playing a game without James Cook. We saw it against the Jets. That Jets game, and I actually rewatched the Jets game last week. That offensive line just destroyed everybody. I'm not trying to marginalize James Cook, but the way that the holes that Ty Johnson and Ray Davis had in that game to operate, I mean, you could take whatever the backup running back at Duke is, and I'm pretty sure they would have had 100 yards as well. So it's the big play ability for James Cook. I think he's a good player. I don't want – nobody get me wrong. I think he's a good player. I love his growth. I think the explosive elements that he provides this offense. But I think I think he benefits from this offense too, with Josh Allen as a quarterback, with this run scheme, with this run blocking. Give me another back that has the same type of athleticism and restores the big play ability. I feel like there's a replaceable element to him where there's a lot of other guys that I get way more nervous about the Bills having to navigate football games with that aren't James Cook.
And that's a Jets defensive line with Quentin Williams in it, right?
Yeah, that guy's good.
I mean, he's legit.
Right.
He's legit. So, but no, what I was going to say is, about this list real quick before we touch on it, there's a lot of players we like. There's only 10 spots.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, you got to choose wisely. And like I said earlier, everybody's got a flag to fly, and you choose what you choose and you go about your business. But there are only 10 spots. But that was pretty interesting.
Let me ask you this, Jerry, about how linemen would feel about this. And I want to draw on when Saquon Barkley had a chance to break the rushing record and ultimately sat out because they're going to the Super Bowl and he doesn't want to get hurt, or they're going to the playoffs. There were many that made the point that was an offensive lineman record. And if his linemen wanted to go for it, he should, it's a team record. It's not just him. It's their line too. And what I'm getting at is, how would the line feel about Cook versus Davis versus Ty Johnson? Because if you're out there as an offensive line and you're mauling, sure, maybe anybody could run behind you, but would there be a feeling of make sure it's the best guy we can get from an offensive lineman?
James Cook is their guy. James Cook is their guy. They want James Cook running behind him, just like they want Ray Davis and they want Ty Johnson. I mean, who's back there is who's going to run for him. I mean, there's a relationship there. I mean, James Cook runs really well behind that line. That line, it's funny. I don't think anybody gets that you do start blocking things sometimes differently. Maybe you'll hang on to stuff a little longer. If you know that James Cook is a big-time jump back cut guy, which he is, that backside guard knows I've got to hang on that block longer because it might not be for 3 or 4 seconds, and all of a sudden he's going to get behind me. So you kind of learn the intricacies of how the backs run. So, yeah, I mean, that's their guy. I mean, heck, James Cook is my guy. I want him in a Bills uniform. But, Man, it's hard to justify money nowadays with the way the cap is and everything else. Think about how hard it would be. And Joe, again, I'm going back to another episode you had. I drove from Dallas this morning, so
Oh, man.
all cards on the table. I listened to about 5 of them on the way up before I popped Theo Vaughn in. But it was like you talked about. I mean, Josh Allen, while he does suck up a large portion of the cap, gives the Bills the ability to go to everybody eats because of the style of play he has, right? He's not a, precision small window guy that's going to throw a ton of timing routes. The way he plays allows them to pay the wide receiver room less and have more guys in the equation and all that. So the way this team's constructed cap-wise, it's just hard to justify certain places where you're going to pour a ton of money in. That does not necessarily, you're not saying you don't like a person. You're saying, I like the Bills being good and not having another 17-year drought. How do we keep the 17-year drought, 17-year drought from happening? You don't mismanage the cap, right? So I think that's the way you got to look at it.
2 players that made the top 10 we've not yet got a thought on. We'll do that when we return, and also get the latest on the NFL and flag football, which is a conversation the owners are about to have. It's coming up on Bill Squad. The 10 most important Bills players. That's this episode of Bill Squad. Jeremy White, Joe Marino, and Jerry Ostrowski. We've gone through a number of the names. The 2 that made the top 10 that we have not really talked about at all in terms of their individual importance. Number 1 is Khalil Shakir, and number 2 is Ed Oliver. Finishing at 7th for Shakir and 10th for Oliver. So a thought on Shakir, Oliver, their importance, and where each of you rank them. I think, Joe, you had Shakir pretty high, number 5 overall, and Oliver, you slotted at number 9, and Jerry, you had Shakir not ranked. So, again, like we're all trying to find the perfect 10, and this is a good one where there's some variability for a guy that did ultimately make the top 10.
Watch the Houston game last year. One of the worst performances I've ever seen from Josh Allen. You know who wasn't there? Khalil Shakir. That guy really about midway through 2023 became he became Josh Allen's most trusted receiver. And he's in some ways different, but similar in the way that Cole Beasley provided just a security blanket of sorts where you just know you can give him the ball and he's going to figure it out. He's going to get open. He's going to make a tough catch. He's going to make a catch in a crowd. He's going to make somebody miss. He's going to maximize every touch that he has with the football. I think there's a stabilizing nature that Khalil Shakir provides to Josh Allen in this offense. And you want to talk about me getting nervous about a skill player not being available for the Bills in a game? Khalil Shakir is the guy that I'd be the most nervous about the Bills having to play offense with, not named Josh Allen. And so I had to put him at number 5.
I think Shakir to me is like with Rousseau. I mean, they're kind of givens, right? I know what their importance is to this football team. I'm very comfortable with what they are. I go back again to my small window thing and I say, who do we have that needs to develop to get us further than where we were? So to me anyway, and I think I'm the only person on the list that had this player on his list, but I went with Joshua Palmer. At some point in time, the front office has to hit on one of these free agent wide receivers. And you look at Joshua Palmer, I think he has the best chance, besides Elijah Moore, who has quite a bit of experience, and Palmer does too. And, but when we made this list, Moore was not available to pick. I don't think he was signed yet. But if you look at his combo ability as far as precision route running, his also ability to get downfield and stretch the field. The other thing that's interesting about Palmer is he plays a lot of slot as well. He can play slot and outside. He's a combo type receiver. So again, looking at who do we have, if they develop to the level of their potential, can give us a weapon we have not had and get us over the top. I think Palmer, especially the money that was given to him, while it wasn't huge, it was enough to where there's an expectation there. And I think that if he develops, it gives us maybe that weapon we need to open up that deep third of the field.
Multi-year contract for Palmer too. So not just this year, but the future, and
right.
An outside option for them. The other name he slotted in at number 10, Ed Oliver, who did he have a bad year? Was it because of supporting cast? I mean, they overmade this front four, and Oliver's, of course, one of the pieces that returns. just after that big contract extension where he played great the first year out of that contract extension. So where does Ed Oliver's career sit right now? He did make the top 10 of the most important Bills on this list.
I think that Ed's kind of like the sun coming up in the morning. We know what Ed's about. We know what Ed does, and he brings a skill set that's highly important to this defense, which is upfield penetration. I think Ed suffered last season, not from a bad season from just him playing. I think he was more banged up than people think. I think that hamstring injury lingered on a little longer than people realize. I mean, he had the hamstring. He was out. He came back. He's a low-leverage guy, right? He's a get-off guy and a low-leverage guy. When you have hamstring issues, especially if it's a high hamstring, those linger, and that limits his advantages. And I think you saw that. And then if you tie into the fact that maybe the guys next to him or with him weren't demanding any specialized treatment as far as game planning goes, it was a tough year for him. But I expect him to come back big this year. I think Ed's a great player. Does all the things that they want him to do at defensive tackle. As long as he can stay healthy, I think he'll be fine.
Well, and I think he also did not benefit from less stunts, right? The Bills' D-line stunted less last year than they did the prior year, and I think that helped unlock a lot of that Oliver, which makes sense. I mean, he's quick, he's flexible, he's got really good density in his frame, which leads to good speed to power conversion. And I want to get that moving on some games and some twists and stunts up front. And I think the Bills doing less of that was detrimental to Ed Oliver. And so for me, I put him at number 9. So he definitely fell a little bit for me, but it's a commitment that the team has. And, you know, it's interesting, the different paths that Jerry and I kind of took in stacking our rankings, where you kind of had some things in the bank and you were looking for other guys that could elevate and take it to the next level. Where for me, it was like, boy, they've got a commitment here and he needs to be the player they committed to. And I think that's where the value comes. And I still think it's relative to the league. It's a perfectly fine contract for Ed Oliver with the way these defensive tackles are getting paid, but it is a sizable commitment. And I think based on that percentage of the cap going to him, he's got to make plays and he's got to make that impact in key moments. And that's why I think he's so important.
Yeah, one of the things that Ed does better than a lot of people in the league is what they call retrace. So say Ed has gap responsibility to his left. If that offensive lineman gets out of his stance quick and maybe cuts him off or gets even with him, Ed has the ability to jump back behind the block and then retrace down the line. Watched a little bit that last year, struggled a little bit with it. And I think that's kind of alluding to what I was getting to earlier about the hamstring and maybe wasn't quite as healthy as people thought he was.
Couple things to just get to really quickly before we sign off. Jordan Poyer wants back. This is a player who has previously been on this list. Did he ever make the top 10 way back when? No, it doesn't look like he's ever made it.
No.
He was an important player for them.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't expect a reunion here, and also at the same time, it's not a surprise to hear he wants to come back. Everybody wants to come back.
Yeah, I bet he does. I have a lot of respect for Jordan Poyer. I think he was a great player for the Bills, but anything other than the Micah Hyde practice squad coach role, I don't see it. I think the rust and age has shown on him for the last 2 years. His last year in Buffalo, and boy, was he rough for Miami. And Poyer said something this past week that really kind of bothers me. When he was talking about, he was on an interview with Mitch Morse, I think, on NFL Network, and was talking about the story of, what he did for the Kansas City game where he couldn't fly and he drove down there and the game was important and he wanted to be there for his teammates. And then he said something that it bothered me. He said, I wouldn't have done that for the guys in Miami. What do you mean? Like they signed you to be that. They signed you because they wanted an edge and a guy with that leadership and somebody that's going to come and improve the toughness of the football team. What do you mean? Like, you got to be who you are. And to me, that was a signal to me that he's just, it's not Poyer. It's not the Poyer that we loved for so long. And unless he just wants to be the practice squad coach, I can definitely leave that one on the table.
No, I've got nothing but love for Jordan Poyer. He was a tremendous player for the Bills, played hard, played physical, left it all out there. Unfortunately, I've been there at some point in your career. The mind still wants to do it, but the body does not. And I mean, that's the point of his career. And, I'm sure that the Bills will let him come back and sign on one day to retire if he wants to. And that would be awesome. And he should retire a bill. He deserves to retire a bill. But as far as this, bringing him back to play, I think we've done a very good job of building and putting pieces in that safety room that are going to continue to build and continue to get better. And unfortunately for Jordan, I think his time as a Bill is done.
If he were to come back, maybe at training camp, practice squad, whatever, it would be at St. John Fisher again. The Bills made that official. Another appearance at St. John Fisher. Jerry, you would have been back at Fredonia way back when, right?
No, man. I actually spent the last, I don't know, I want to say 3 or 4 years of my career we were at St. John Fisher.
Okay.
Big fan of the Pittsford pub. Love the Pittsford pub. And
that's right.
Go downtown, hit a little dinosaur barbecue. Rochester was good to me. It wasn't Fredonia. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Thank goodness it wasn't Fredonia. Fredonia was rough, man. Rough. Yeah. But no, we were in St. John Fisher.
Their famous tales of the Fredonia 500, I think they called it, when the Bills break camp, everybody driving back 100 miles an hour on the thruway.
You could also say that was downtown when guys were trying to drive their golf carts to downtown to the bar scene as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a smaller version of that.
Yeah, Fredonia's not lacking for those kind of places. So back at St. John Fisher, that's great news, getting out there, and it's a great time of year for them to be out there. You see how the Bills, it just works for them. And then one last thing before we go, there's going to be NFL owners meetings. They're going to discuss a revamped playoff seating, and we can get to that maybe in a future show. But the other thing they're going to discuss is flag football and the NFL players, whether or not they're going to go to the to the Olympics as flag football players. If they pass this resolution, active players would be allowed to play. And I mean, there's a million different legal things, and there's talk about cap relief if a guy gets hurt. And it sounds like it's going to get really boring, and there's a lot of paperwork. So I'll ask this. What percentage of players do you think would want to go? And what position? Tyreek Hill wants to go, right? Does Josh think, yes, I want to play flag football for an Olympic gold medal? It's obviously a big story. I feel like it would be a coin toss on some of the best players. I don't need to do that. I'm not here to prove I can catch a touchdown in flags. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that, because gold medal's a gold medal, but how many guys would want to
go? Robert Edwards is all I have to say. If you remember who that is.
Yeah, Patriots running back, rookie on the beach.
Yes.
Right?
So, no, I'm not real fired up about sending my guys over to play flag football. Now, if it was actual football, maybe that'd be different, because they know how to – I'm not saying they know how to play flag, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They're well-versed and trained and ready to go. No, man, I don't know why. Well, I do know why. That's a money grab. It's a money grab. We're going to sit and talk about eliminating the oldest sport in the world, wrestling, from the Olympics to add flag football. Come on, man. What are we doing? What are we doing? But I could put a good team together if they let me.
It's such an interesting conversation, because it feels like every other sport they do, right? The pro athletes, they compete in the Olympics or whatever the pinnacle worldwide event is for that sport. And maybe football is so Americanized. I'd be nervous about it, obviously. I think quarterbacks are probably the one you wouldn't be concerned about, but do you want to see Maxwell Harrison out there covering guys? I don't know. You're gonna practice, right? You're gonna do 7-on-7. It's just an increased injury risk that I don't think people are gonna like it if star player is gonna have to miss the season because they tore their ACL playing flag football and overseas.
Yeah, you'd think the networks would definitely want it and be pushing for it,
surely.
For sure. And we know how the power of the television has. They got these teams playing on Wednesdays and Thursdays and Tuesdays, and we'll see. So NFL next round of owners meetings, a couple interesting things they'll be voting on, and we'll see if there's any sort of change coming up. All right, the top 10 most important Bills. It's in the books here. Of course, the episode, you can find it in the Locked On Bills podcast. Joe's got his initial episode, the follow-up with everyone describing and explaining why they put guys where they put them. You guys didn't get on me for putting Cole Bishop number 5. Maybe that's for a future episode. Safety play. I think it's important for the Bills. But anyway, been a great combo here. And thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Like and subscribe. And, of course, check out the Locked On Bills podcast wherever you get your podcasts. The top 10 most important Bills series rolling there. That's it for us. Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Much love. Go Bills.